Imagine standing in the midst of a heated argument, feeling your heart race with every word exchanged, every sentence carrying the weight of a battle. The air around you is charged. Each response you give is crafted with precision, each one a weapon aimed to prove your position is correct. The person you're debating with is doing the exact same thing, each of you locked in a cycle of defending your views, each of you focused not on understanding the other but on asserting your own point. Neither of you is truly listening. You're simply waiting for the moment to strike back. Then someone steps in. They don't take sides. They don't offer advice on what to say or how to win the argument. Instead, they say something unsettling, something that catches you off guard. You have already lost. You are stunned. How could you have lost? You're defending yourself, holding your ground, battling to prove you're right. But according to this person, the moment you engage in this struggle, you've already surrendered your power. What does that mean? How could fighting for your position be a form of defeat? The answer lies in the understanding that true strength, as this person argues, doesn't come from winning arguments or proving others wrong. It comes from something far more subtle and unexpected. It comes from the power of restraint, the power of silence. This is a central tenet of Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy. He believed that power is not found in words or in dominating conversations, but in control, the ability to influence without needing to be heard. Most people think that arguments are about proving a point, but Nietzsche had a very different perspective. For him, arguments were more about something psychological, something deeper than just facts. People argue for all sorts of reasons, many of which have nothing to do with truth. Why do people argue? If you've ever found yourself embroiled in a heated exchange, you've probably wondered what started it in the first place. Nietzsche would argue that most arguments aren't truly about truth. They're about something much deeper. They are often about ego protection, about safeguarding one's identity. Accepting that one is wrong can feel like a threat to one's very existence, and the mind instinctively resists this at all costs. Arguments often aren't about logical reasoning or facts. They're about power struggles, about dominance. Who speaks last? Who controls the tone? Who forces the other person to back down? In some cases, arguments stem from a need for social validation. People may argue not because they genuinely believe their point, but because they want to be seen as strong, intelligent, or confident by others. Nietzsche viewed these kinds of reactions as signs of weakness. To him, those who react emotionally in an argument are being controlled. The moment you allow someone to provoke you, you've already lost the battle. One of Nietzsche's most famous ideas is the will to power, but it's often misunderstood. It's not about brute force or domination. It's about the ability to impose your will on reality, to shape the world around you to align with your vision. This doesn't always require words. In fact, sometimes the greatest power lies in the ability not to react, to remain calm and composed when others expect you to engage. This is where Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or overman, comes into play. The Übermensch is not someone who reacts emotionally or fights simply for the sake of winning. He is someone who understands when to engage and when to remain silent. This is the essence of true power, the ability to control the entire interaction, not by dominating with words, but by mastering your own responses and emotions. Nietzsche believed that power doesn't lie in arguing or talking over others. It's about choosing when to speak, when to be silent, and when to simply observe. Let's imagine a situation where two people are engaged in an argument. One person is loud, aggressive, and clearly trying to dominate the conversation, while the other remains calm and collected, listening more than speaking. The second person doesn't get drawn into emotional back and forths. Instead, they wait for the right moment, and when they speak, their words carry weight. The conversation shifts in their favor, not because of force or aggression, but because they controlled the timing and tone of their response. In this scenario, the person who remains composed holds the real power. Nietzsche's philosophy suggests that the one who stays emotionally detached and doesn't engage in the struggle for dominance ultimately wins in the long run. Strategic silence, when used correctly, is often far more powerful than winning a debate with loud, forceful arguments. Silence, when wielded as a tool, is a psychological weapon. It forces the other person to reveal more about themselves. It makes them question their own position, creating discomfort and uncertainty. This discomfort gives you control. The Übermensch doesn't merely remain silent in arguments. He uses silence strategically. A well-timed pause, a moment of restraint, or a carefully crafted response can completely shift the dynamics of the conversation. Silence, in Nietzsche's view, is not weakness. It is strength. The power of silence can be seen in the actions of some of history's greatest figures. Take Socrates, for example. He didn't engage in arguments the way most people did. He didn't shout or force his point. Instead, Socrates used a method so powerful it has influenced intellectual discussions for centuries: the Socratic method. This method isn't about direct confrontation. Instead, Socrates would ask questions that expose the contradictions in the beliefs of others. Imagine a proud Athenian politician who claims to be the wisest man in the city. Rather than attacking him directly, Socrates simply asks him, "What is wisdom?" The politician, eager to prove his intellect, begins to define wisdom. But with every question Socrates asks, the politician's definition begins to fall apart. Socrates doesn't need to tell the man he's wrong. The man realizes it for himself. Socrates understood a fundamental truth: people don't accept what you tell them. They only accept what they discover on their own. This is the power of silent questioning, of not directly confronting someone, but letting them confront their own inconsistencies. In this way, Socrates won without ever raising his voice. In a different context, we see Steve Jobs embodying a similar principle in his leadership at Apple. Jobs didn't avoid arguments, but he didn't engage in them without purpose either. He understood the power of controlling the conversation. One famous example comes from the design of the iPhone. The engineers at Apple wanted to include physical buttons, while Jobs insisted on a full touch screen. Rather than argue endlessly, he guided his team to realize on their own that a touchscreen was not just possible, but inevitable. Jobs didn't waste time trying to prove he was right. Instead, he used his persuasive power to make others believe they had come to the conclusion themselves. This strategic manipulation of ideas is not about winning an argument. It's about leading others to your vision without them even realizing it. A third example comes from the battlefield, where the samurai Miyamoto Musashi demonstrated the value of silence in his duels. Musashi was undefeated in over 60 duels, not just because of his skill with a sword, but because of his psychological mastery. In one famous duel, Musashi arrived hours late, deliberately angering his opponent, Sasaki Kojiro. By the time they fought, Kojiro was so enraged he made critical mistakes, and Musashi won effortlessly. Musashi understood that if you can control someone's emotions, you've already won the fight. Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Miyamoto Musashi all understood that the key to true power lies not in arguing loudly or forcefully, but in the ability to control the flow of a conversation and dictate its outcome. Each of them embodied the idea that silence, strategic restraint, and psychological dominance are often more powerful than brute force or constant verbal conflict. For Nietzsche, true power was not about talking endlessly to prove a point. It was about influence, control, and choosing when to engage. The Übermensch, the ideal Nietzschean individual, is someone who knows when to remain silent, when to speak, and when to let others reveal their weaknesses through their own actions and words. The Übermensch does not react impulsively or emotionally. Instead, he maintains control, calmly observing and choosing his moments to act, always with purpose and clarity. This principle of strategic silence doesn't just apply to philosophical discussions or business meetings. It extends into everyday life and interactions. Imagine, for example, an argument with a friend or a colleague. Most people, when they feel challenged, respond defensively, trying to prove that they are right. However, when you engage with someone who practices the art of silence, You may notice that they don't react to your provocations or get caught up in the emotional frenzy of the debate. Instead, they remain calm and composed. Their silence forces you to examine your own position more closely, to question whether your words are truly aligned with your thoughts, and it ultimately shifts the power in the conversation. The reason why silence is so powerful in these situations is because it generates tension. Tension is uncomfortable, and discomfort often leads people to start second-guessing themselves. When someone doesn't react to an emotional provocation, it creates an unsettling atmosphere, causing the other person to wonder why their words haven't elicited a response. This uncertainty can make them more self-conscious and more likely to make mistakes or retract their position. The Übermensch understands this dynamic intuitively. He knows that silence, when wielded properly, has the power to unbalance others and force them to reveal their true selves. When silence is used strategically, it can make others feel as though they are losing control, which in turn gives the person who remains silent the upper hand. However, Nietzsche's philosophy is not advocating for complete withdrawal from conflict. In fact, he believed that conflict, when used correctly, can be an essential tool for growth and mastery. The Übermensch does not shy away from difficult situations or emotional challenges. Rather, he uses them to strengthen his character, to sharpen his intellect, and to assert his dominance over the circumstances. The key is to choose your battles wisely, to engage only when the argument or conflict will serve a greater purpose. Nietzsche's view of conflict was never about avoiding it or retreating from difficult conversations. It was about mastering it. He understood that true power lies in knowing when to engage in conflict and when to remain silent. The Übermensch, therefore, is someone who actively shapes his world, who refuses to be controlled by external forces, and who stands firm in his ability to determine the course of his own actions and responses. This idea resonates with modern psychological research on power dynamics and emotional regulation. In social interactions, research has shown that the most powerful individuals are often not the ones who talk the most, but those who control the flow of conversation. These individuals do not feel the need to interrupt or over-explain themselves. Instead, they speak sparingly, carefully choosing their words and timing to maximize their impact. By remaining silent at key moments, they create an aura of authority that commands respect and attention without ever needing to raise their voice. This is why calmness and composure are seen as signs of confidence in social and professional settings. People who can remain unshaken during emotionally charged situations are often perceived as more powerful, as they appear in control of both themselves and the situation at hand. Nietzsche's Übermensch embodies this level of self-control and psychological mastery. He does not react emotionally to the actions or words of others. Instead, he chooses when to respond and how to respond, always with the aim of maintaining control over the interaction. Additionally, silence can be a tool of persuasion. Studies in behavioral psychology have demonstrated that people who stay calm and composed in the midst of a heated argument are far more persuasive than those who become emotional or defensive. This is because humans are wired to view calmness as a sign of confidence and strength. When someone remains quiet, they project a sense of inner strength that draws others to them, making their eventual words even more impactful. The real power of silence lies in self-mastery. Nietzsche's will to power is not just about asserting dominance over others. It's about mastering oneself to the point where others are unknowingly influenced by your calm and composed presence. This form of power is not achieved through loud arguments or forceful debates. It's achieved through control, restraint, and the careful use of silence as a tool to shape conversations and interactions to your advantage. But when should you speak, and when should you remain silent? Nietzsche's philosophy suggests that true power is not about avoiding all conflict but choosing the right moments to engage. If you are constantly reacting to every provocation, you are losing control. However, if you strategically decide when and how to engage, you can shape the outcome of the situation in your favor. Silence, then, becomes not a sign of weakness, but a powerful strategy that enables you to assert your influence over the conversation without ever having to raise your voice. Next time you find yourself in an argument, take a moment to pause. Before you respond, consider the bigger picture. Is this argument truly worth your energy? Are you reacting emotionally, or are you in control of the situation? Is this battle helping you grow, or is it simply a distraction from something more important? True power, as Nietzsche saw it, is not found in endless arguments or in trying to win every battle. It's found in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, in understanding that silence itself can be a weapon that gives you control over the conversation and, ultimately, the situation. The key to mastering silence is understanding when it is the most effective tool in your arsenal. Silence is not about being passive or avoiding conflict altogether. It is about knowing when to engage in the struggle and when to step back, allowing the situation to unfold on its own terms. By choosing your words carefully and using silence strategically, you can navigate any conversation or conflict with grace and power. Nietzsche's philosophy on silence, power, and the Übermensch offers profound insights into human behavior and social dynamics. The ability to control your reactions, to stay calm in the face of provocation, and to choose your battles wisely is a form of strength that few possess. Those who can master the art of silence and control the flow of conversations are the true masters of influence and power. They do not need to prove themselves in endless arguments. Instead, they shape the world around them with their actions and their ability to remain calm and composed in the most challenging of situations. In the end, Nietzsche's view of power challenges us to rethink how we engage with others. It's not about dominating conversations or winning arguments. It's about controlling ourselves, mastering our emotion, and using silence as a tool to shape our interactions and our lives. True power lies not in words, but in the strategic silence before them, the pause that forces others to question themselves, and the decision to speak only when it serves your purpose. That is the silent trick that gives you real